I think I'm back. I think I'm. This is. Oh wow. This is what happens. Okay. Yeah. Okay. It's online on the thing. Is this thing on? Right. Okay. So I believe I am. Yep. I'm back. This is, I think, the third time where I've managed to wreck stuff before beginning. So what I'm gonna do, I've given you the preamble. Awesome, Steve. Cheers for that. Okay. So I'm gonna attach the Tiltify campaign thing in the comments section. Now, my original plan. Hello, Mark. How are you, man? So my original plan was that I was going to, for any donations of 25 and above towards the War Child appeal, I was going to chuck in a guitar lesson, a one-on-one 60-minute guitar lesson. But I'm in a charitable mood, so I'm bringing it down to 20. So if anyone is capable of donating £20 or more to the War Child's campaign in support of children displaced by or affected by the coronavirus crisis, then I will throw in a 60 minutes guitar lesson on top of that. So it's a bit of a win-win. You get to do a good thing, and I get to show you all the more kind of stuff. So let's begin. So for this week's lesson, I am going to talk all about improv, so improvisation, and in doing so, I want to talk about it in a way which can help everybody. So my goal, my aim with what I'm doing today is that no matter, chat is disabled. Oh, that's bizarre. Or is that the old one? It might be the old one. Yeah, as I was saying, so my idea of this is that I want to help anyone, no matter how good or bad you might already be, with improvisation. If this is something that's completely new to you, or something that you've been doing for a while, but you're a little bit stuck in a rut in, I want to help both kind of categories there. So we're going to begin by taking it from a point where I think almost everyone watching has at least some experience, some familiarity, and in doing so, I'm going to develop and expand upon it. And there's three major kind of ways in which I improvise and I feel is a key to effective improvisation. And I'm going to be comparing it a lot to language. I like learning languages. It's a bit of a kind of a side hobby of mine. Being from Britain, I'm terrible at it, but it's something I try to do anyway. And I always see a lot of sort of parallels between trying to learn a language and trying to improvise, because of course music is a language. There's a lot of parallels between linguistics. I'm not Noam Chomsky, so I'm not going to go any further into the linguistic side. I'm going to stick to the music. But we're going to begin by, I'm going to do a little bit of an improv over. So what I've done today is, as I've said in a recent, I'm not going to be doing it on my phone, I'm going to be doing it on here, I forgot about that. So, as I said in a recent stream, I don't really like improvising over the same sort of rock backing tracks that you get online, because they're a bit old hat, like. Get a bit tired of it. They're good, they're useful, and it's great practice, but I do it a lot, so I get a bit tired of it. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be using some alternative kind of sources, and I really like improvising over synthwave. And I have some friends who make electronic music, and so joining me, at least in audio form, will be a few friends of mine, a few guests. And the first one is going to be, in doing this first piece, I'm going to do a little bit of, I'm going to do a bit of preamble first. So the new De Profundis album, Aidan, we were recording it before lockdown, and we are still kind of doing it a little bit, but unfortunately, COVID-19, the greatest poser of them all, has scuppered our plans slightly. We are working on it, we're doing our best, but it is going to be held up a little bit, at least for the get-go. But hopefully, it's not going to be held up for too long, because it's sounding pretty awesome. I'm really, really psyched about it. My bandmates have outdone themselves, and our producer, Pete Dalsett from The Blinding Light of Faith, who we're working with again, he's absolutely nailing it. So, to begin, I'm going to start by giving some tips about probably the way that almost anyone watching who plays guitar has some familiarity with. So the that's where we all begin. It's that blues box where everyone from AC/DC to ZZ Top has used this in some way, shape, or form, and they do it because it works. It sounds good. The whole point of the minor pentatonic scale is you're taking the minor scale and you're leaving out the notes which could be argued as slightly superfluous. The notes which are leaving your root note, your third, minor third, your perfect fourth, your fifth, and your minor seventh. Isn't that Whipping by Debo? Anyway, so for my very first improv, I'm going to use a piece by my friend James Dodge Roger, and it's a piece called Overpass. So before I begin, I'm going to say a couple of things that I'm going to do. So a lot of instruments that solo, let's think about what instruments that you do instrumental improvised solos. We have saxophones, we have, singers will solo a lot, clarinets, flutes, trumpets, and one thing that all these instruments have in common with, yeah, pretty much, RIP second and sixth. So one of the things that these instruments all have in common is they have to take breaths. Even if you're John Coltrane and you're like some mutant with lungs of steel, you still have to take breaths at some point. Guitar players, we don't. And so that's why you can easily do that until the cows come home and bore the hell out of anyone who's watching other than us. That's not to say that we can't do cool, flashy stuff. Obviously, I break out in hives. I'm not shredding every 10 seconds. But nonetheless, we need to make sure we're pacing things out, and that leads our improvisations to take breaths, just like any other instrumentalist would. That's how you create natural sounding melodies. Otherwise, things sound forced. Things don't sound like any other instrument. And that's going to be something I'm going to be getting into a lot today, about what things that these great soloists, these great improvisers over a series of different subgenres, instruments have in common. I want to find what Miles Davis, Kiko Loureiro, John Mayer, Brian May, what these guys all have in common. And there's a couple things which might, but anyway, without further ado, here is Overpass. You get the picture. So when I'm doing that, one thing that, the reason why we like to use the minor pentatonic scale, especially as guitar players, is firstly because there's very few details, and as guitar players we like that sort of thing. Secondly, we also like the fact that this can fall into our fingers quite nicely. So index, pinky, index, ring, index, ring, index, ring, index, pinky, index, pinky. This is what we call position 1 of your minor pentatonic scale. And while it sounds great, there's a reason why so many gazillions of classic tunes use it, and so many great guitar players have used it over so long, B.B. King to Zakk Wylde. It still has its certain limitations. Like, I know that by the time I was getting into like the 30-second mark there, I was like, right, okay, where am I going from here? What's next? How can I keep this sounding interesting? So that's where you have to start to think of scales by what they really are. And that is not just a collection of notes in a certain shape on the fretboard, but a sequence of either sharps, flats, or natural notes that can be across any sort of region. So in this case, A minor, the reason I'm using A minor pentatonic is because no sharps, and it's easy to think about. We have A, C, D, E, then G, then we're back to A. A, C, D, E, G, A. So when I'm doing that, I don't have to play those notes exactly there. I can do them elsewhere. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to so A, C, and then D. But I can find D on here, so I can go here. So then I have C, so A, I can move that, C, D, and then C here. So D, E, and I can find G here, and then G, A, and I can find C here. So what we end up with is those same notes, but in a different order, across different octaves in certain places, on the fretboard, and I can keep that going, I can keep that cycle happening. Hello, John. I hope you're good. It's been so long. I hope everything's doing good in Ireland. And Aidan, yeah, well, we have plans. We're working on the next one. So with the next record, because I can't really go and gig at the minute. So we'll see how that's going. I'm already really excited with the new stuff. It's sounding pretty cool so far. So I can keep that going across, and then I'll and there was a video of Guthrie Governor playing this, and he'll just say, slide up and use your ears. And then when I'm in here, even though these are the same notes, by virtue of the fact that they're placed differently in the fretboard, I'm going to think of them differently. The melodies that come out when I play are going to change. So I'm going to stick this on for just another couple seconds, and I'm going to play in this new kind of way, and it's the exact same notes, but because they're positioned differently, I'm going to be thinking of I'm going to be coming up with slightly different sounding stuff. So that's already sounding just a little bit different from what I was doing before, simply because I am envisioning it in a different way, same notes, but outside of my box, which also means I can't rely on those same old tricks. I'm in slightly unfamiliar territory, even though I'm playing exactly the same scale. How do we deal with that? Well, we'll get to that. I'll get to that in a bit. So, likewise, you can keep going. Oh, the chat is working now. Oh, good stuff. Excellent. Okay, so we can keep that going, and I can go, instead of going here, I can find the same notes. Same notes, but in a different position. And I can take that a bit further. Now, when you learn that at first, when you're initially doing that, what you're going to be doing is thinking, I'm in this position, I'm in that position, now I'm in this position, I'm going to keep going, I'm going to move to this one. And you aren't kind of, at first, you're not going to be moving fluently. But you do it for a while, and eventually the barriers between these positions start to break, especially if you do kind of what I was doing there. And you start to slide across the positions, either upwards or downwards. So, a bit more of me whittling about with this, but I'm now going to be shifting between those positions, and just watch kind of how I approach this. So. doing all that, I feel so much more comfortable and I feel more confident moving around because I have more to play about with, even though there are a couple of bum notes here and there. Despite that, I can use my ears to follow along as well. The cool thing about the minor pentatonic scale is there's less to kind of hear because there's only 5 notes. So I'm listening out for, oh, see, like, I get up to that one, I know that's a bit out, but then that helps when I'm using my ears to find that along. And it's going to be something I'm going to do a little bit later, which can help with that and help your ears kind of attune themselves to exactly where in the scale you are, even if you're kind of flying blind a little bit with the actual scale position, because there's a lot, it is a lot to remember. Speaking of, so with that in mind, if we're expanding out of the minor pentatonic scale, then it can be a bit of a chore learning another scale, another position, another, oh, okay, here's something, here's another extended thing that we have to think about. And it can be tough and it can feel like a chore. And sometimes you just want a nice, refreshing drop of Beck's Blue. This is not product placement, I promise. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take you through that scale, and instead of thinking of it like we're going through a new scale, we're going to find a new scale, we're going to find a scale inside this scale. So, first of all, as we said, minor pentatonic, we're basically killing off some notes. So as Dan astutely put, rest in peace, 2nd and 6th. So we're going to invoke a little bit of necromancy here, and we're going to bring back the 2nd. We're going to bring back the 2nd. So it's actually quite easy to find when you get used to it, because remember, this first note and this note are the root and the minor 3rd. So that's going to be the 2nd, and the other one is going to be here. So rather than thinking of learning a new scale altogether, we're thinking of it as we're slowly turning our minor pentatonic into another scale. And when I do that, I get a few more kind of fun things. So kind of what I started to do there is, as well as doing the, gotta look ridiculous when I'm thinking of improvising on the spot. I can see why you see all those like weird kind of guitar face videos. Anyway, so I stuck in that 2nd, and eventually, especially if you're kind of getting accustomed to where the root note is and how the root note sounds, you can then see, oh, well, it's just a 2 semitones above. It's going to be your major 2nd, and eventually you can do the same thing with your minor 6. So if we think that this is the minor pentatonic scale, just skip that note, and then go. And you can do that with your other positions as well. What I'm going to do, I'm probably going to post this afterwards, but this is why we use something called the caged system, which is 5 different positions of a major scale or minor scale, based on your bar chords. So based on, but we're going to get into that in a moment, because what I want to do, I'm going to use another piece, and this tune I have Andy Weirs to thank, who is in the chat, and this is for a project that we've been working on. It's a sort of a remix / homage / cover / of the theme tune from a movie that time has long forgot. This is sort of a reinterpretation of the theme tune to the sci-fi classic, using the term classic very liberally there, Your Hunter from the Future. So now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to improv over some total cheese, and it's going to be in the key of E minor, so I'm going to be doing everything up. But now that I've looked at now that I'm expanding from our pentatonic to our minor and major, and new stuff's going to happen as a result. So here we go. So that's a bit of your hunter from the future. He is indeed the man. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to look at how we can kind of sort of spice that up a bit, because the problem with scales, and here is where my clumsy language metaphors come in. So my problem with using scales constantly in improvisation is it's a little bit like if you're learning just words in a language. You're not really learning the best way of kind of linking them together, but you're just going off pure vocab. So you're learning the words for where, do, how, like where is the, something essential, you know, where is the hospital, where is the police station, where is the pub, important stuff like that. And I'm going to take that and I'm going to do a little bit more of it. And to start with, I'm going to just talk about some really basic kind of tips for phrasing that I like to use. And this is going to be where it's going to get pretty weird, because you're going to get to hear me do some scats in it. There's been a lot of points sometimes where I'll be improvising over something and I'll hate the sound of it. I'll just think this just sounds like kind of note salad. And then one thing that kind of helps is if I sort of try to like scat or like hum an idea over like just out of tune, like just myself, and then play it back on the guitar, and all of a sudden I will usually enjoy the phrasing a lot more. It'll just sound nicer, especially because it's not just me kind of vomiting out whatever is coming out on my fingers, but I'm actually actively thinking about it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the minor scale. So now that we've kind of seen our totally adapted minor scale from the E minor pentatonic, it's just going to be, so just as a quick minor for anyone playing along, 12, 14, 15, 12, 14, 15. And then what I'm going to do this time, I'm going to use a 3-note string shape, because we're going to be getting into that in a moment. So 12, 14, 15, 12, 14, 15, 12, 14, 16, 12, 14, 16 again, 13, 15, 17, then 14, 15, 17. So what I'm going to try to do, to the detriment of all of your eardrums, I'm going to try to kind of scat an idea and see if I can lay it out on the fretboard. So these are all I'm going in dry with these, so they might go wrong, but there's some cool things that come as a result of kind of playing these wrong as well. Okay. See, that was something that was a bit wrong there, but now I can figure that out. Oh. There you go. Which might look absolutely ridiculous, but it's kind of, I always find it kind of helps. It helps me figure out stuff which, because when I'm doing that, when I'm kind of humming, I'm thinking of a line that kind of works to sort of murmur back to myself, as opposed to what works in the scale, what works in my hand, oh, this way I can shred, right? Instead, I'm thinking in terms purely of melody, and that means that what comes out just sounds a little bit more natural, no matter how badly I might have scattered it. So, with that in mind, now I'm not sure if you can actually hear me doing all these, which is again for your benefit, but I'm going to try to do that over the top of this and see what comes out. Oh, does he? Oh, that does make a lot of sense that Mero would do that. So yeah, it just kind of helps you go outside of your comfort zone of thinking in terms of just what's on the fretboard and thinking what might work musically, even if it is completely off the top of your head. However, what will advance that and make that better for you is by just knowing these scales really well in your ears. And so this next thing that I'm going to show you is something which I heard through Greg Howe, the absolute guitar legend, who I was fortunate enough a couple of years ago to catch a clinic of his. And he said that he would do what I'm about to show you as a way of just developing his familiarity with a certain scale. We're going to keep using it with the minor scale because we're all sad people here, so we like our minor scales. So what I'm going to do is in the key of E still. That's your minor scale. And what I want to do is I want to improvise using just this string, and I can go beyond. But the idea is that it's all coming from my ears. There's no shape. There's no scale shape. The reason why scale shapes are designed to be, at least in some way, shape, or form, convenient, and this is not. But the cool thing about that is two things. It throws us completely out of our scale, our usual shapes. So we're only thinking in terms of the intervals and how the scale is supposed to sound. When that happens, the result is that you are going to be flying blind. You're going to have to adapt to how. So if you want to get the third up, you're going to have to get used to moving the minor third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, perfect sixth, perfect sixth, minor sixth, then minor seventh, and that was a bit messy, but keep the idea. So I'm going to, and the other thing is obviously if I'm just doing this, then the phrasing is going to be all over the place. So by doing this, now when I'm doing your, we have 50 years, 70 years or whatever of electric guitar players using this shape. And hello Mark, it's been good man, I'm just getting a lot more practice time in as a result of this whole kind of lockdown thing. So there's no real benefits to it, but that's a cool thing. So I'm going to be putting on a little bit more yaw and see, one thing I really like about doing this is you end up finding these ideas which you wouldn't normally use, and you would never normally use them because they go outside from whatever shapes that you are comfortable using, whether that's a minor pentatonic or kind of a shred sort of. You're thrown out of that, and you start to envision these harmonic sort of frameworks, melodic frameworks, as something beyond just a shape, which is something that's so important, especially for guitar players, because we get really kind of holed up in this idea that a scale is something that exists on a certain fret, and it never is. It's a sequence of notes, which is why all these different positions I've looked at are possible. So now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this approach and I'm going to try it over something a little bit more kind of intense. And what I'm going to do as well is I started using my free note string scales. So that was, so in the case of minor, that's going to be this. So 3, 5, 6, 3, 5, 6, then 3, 5, 7. It's a premium RG21 mark. So then 3, 5, 7, then 4, 6, 8, then 5, 6, 8. Another position for this, but what you're ultimately doing is doing something called a relative major. Is I can play, instead of G minor, I can play a B flat major instead, because if you go 3 semitones up from your minor scale and then play a major scale, then it's going to be playing, as I spoke about last time, it's going to be the same notes. So G minor, the following notes: A flat, C, D flat, F, G. And so does the B flat major scale, just in a different order. So I'm going to. This is going to be. This one is by my buddy and bandmate and comrade and cohort Daniel Saunders, which is a tune called Death Gazer, and this is the most metal I'm getting today. So enjoy it while you can. It's going to be a bit loud this one, so I'm going to have to make sure it's a bit. Here it comes, so G minor. So far, what I've done is a combination. Jason, hey man, how are you? Yes, scales are important to learn, and are all scales important and all the different mode? Or what would you recommend as a fail-safe scale that works? Well, what I'll do, as I said earlier, Jason, what I'm going to do is at the end I'm going to post some links to what we call the caged system. So that is the major and minor scales in 5 different positions. So it'll be 5 different ways that you can play, for example, C major and A minor, and those are like, I would say that and the minor pentatonic scales are the most important ones, because a lot of the other ones kind of tie into those. So if you know your 5 positions of the caged system, the caged major scales, and hello, Matteo! Greetings from the land of the porco dio. Any Italian speakers who are offended by me using that phrase, then I do apologise. But it's good, man. I hope you are staying safe. From what we've heard over here, it's really, really tough there. So I hope that you're doing good and that you and yours are all doing okay. But yeah, so I would say that, as I was saying, yeah, Jason. Those scales that you learn, they will, in different contexts, which comes into what we were talking about last week, in different contexts, they will be different scales. So your position 2 of that's a Dorian that we spoke about before. So anyway, the advantage of kind of everything that I just did is that it kind of, these are, especially these are great fun, but you do again get a little bit limited in your vocabulary. There's only so much you can do. I mean, you probably saw that I went back into my blues box at some point because I felt that I was kind of losing nice, genuine, melodic kind of material that I could use, that I could actually get away with in these shapes. And that's where, so we've been through scales. Now, the next thing that we're going to talk about that we can use for improvising is arpeggios. Now, this is a really, really important one because this can be tough at first. So I'm going to just strictly talk about your major and minor arpeggios. Now, what I'm not talking about though is this. There will be no sweep picking here today. It is going to be entirely about using arpeggios as a melodic device and how you can use them kind of in your improvisation. And to talk about that, I'm going to use an example of a tune. I'm going to bring my gain down just a smidge because I'm going to use a tune which I've been using to improvise a lot recently, and it kind of ties into my whole thing about really enjoying using synthwave. Because I've been using the new song by The Weeknd, Blinding Lights, to improvise over because firstly, it's an absolute rager. For those of you who aren't familiar with the tune, you've probably heard it. It's the one which is like... And it's got four chords which go for pretty much the whole thing. So you have a minor, then you have a C minor, then you have a B flat major, then you have a B major. So. What's my favourite guitar? I don't know what I do quite like this one, but I've got to say I was planning on using my Fender today, my Fender Strat, which is definitely one of my favourites, but sadly broke a string last night while preparing for this exact stream. So I figured, okay, I'm just going to stick to these ones. I've got 11s on this one as well, so it's easier. So what I'm going to do though, so those four chords I mentioned. Now I'm not going to use a backing track because I don't want to get sucked again. Those are your chords, and when you know your arpeggios well enough, so when you know a position, we're just going to use one position per string. So here is your minor shape, and then on the A string you could also use a major shape, and then on the A string here's a minor shape, and here's a major shape. I'm not allowed to listen to The Weeknd on weekdays. Really, I'm starting at 18 getting back to some normality. Well, it's good to hear that things are slowly kind of on their way back here. I'm not really sure if we're going back or not here. It's a bit of a mess in the UK, to be honest. But enough about that, because then I'll end up on an even longer tirade than this actual lesson. So what I'm going to do is I want to, without playing along to a backing track, without playing along to the song, I want to use these arpeggios to get the sound of the song. So we have again F. So if I'm... Again, what I'm doing there is I'm finding the chord tones as I go on, and that can be, as you heard, a bit of a fumble at times, but the reason it's beneficial is because when you're looking for the chord tones in an arpeggio, you're finding all the notes which will definitely, absolutely, 100% work in that chord. So my plan was that Over F, I would just play something in the F triad, something in the C triad for C, something in the E flat triad for E flat, and then something in the B flat triad for B flat. And when you do that, you get this very melodic, sort of very effective kind of way of playing where everything is going to work. And to give an example of some players who do this really, really incredibly well, you have, well, Jimi Hendrix. So he's, one of the key examples. So that whole, so if you take Axis Bold as Love, you have 4 chords which make up the majority of the idea. So you have A major, E major, F sharp minor, and then D major. And what he does is he uses so many different voicings of these chords to get a sound which doesn't quite sound like he's playing a chord progression, doesn't sound like he's playing a solo, but something that's in between, and that is just incredibly effective. So when he's doing that, he is playing he's playing these notes from these from all the triads, from all these different positions of those bar chords, and it no longer sounds like he's just going, which would have sounded terrible, nor is he just going, because then it would have just sounded like, a bit of a mess. It's that combination which arpeggiated playing can do. Another guy who does this a lot is John Mayer. But you see it a lot in, whenever you see these kind of really intricate kind of, all these kind of sweet ones, usually if they're quite enjoyable to listen to, they are following the harmony. Or you can see it with tapping as well. I think one of the key example of this is, like you say, okay, Hellbent for Leather, Judas Priest. So you have A minor, then you have E major, so then you have E minor, so E minor, and then E major, or Randy Rhoads' Crazy Train. You have these notes are part of an F sharp chord, and these notes are part of a D major chord. So even when you're doing this kind of very intricate, kind of elaborate sort of playing, there is still, how do you figure out the chord progression or the key when using solos, or even improvising on riffs using single notes? So for what I'm doing, today, I would suggest that you would, for now, look at the chord progression of a backing track when you're doing it. What I'm going to be doing after next week, because I've got my plan for next week, but I'm going to be getting into a little bit more theory in these lessons, because I think that a lot of people kind of struggle with things like kind of ear training and how to figure this kind of stuff out by ear. It's going to touch into a lot of the stuff that we do in the fretboard. What I'm not going to be doing is sitting here with pen and paper writing notes, but I'm going to show you exactly kind of how you can do that. But really what I do is I'm just, in the case of Blinding Lights, for example, I just finding the chord progression, and I'll just kind of look at it and go, okay, how can I adapt around that? And then I'm thinking about my arpeggios. Now you can combine the two, so you can, if something is in a diatonic key, so stays in a key, for example, if something's in the key of G minor with no sharps or flats, with no kind of sharps or flats which don't exist in the key already, and it stays like that, then all these kind of tones, all these tones from the arpeggio will exist in the scale anyway. But in arpeggio form, it's a little bit harder. So that's where I'm going to take us to, because the problem with this is, okay, so here is another clumsy linguistics comparison. If I am playing a scale and whittling like that, then I am, as I said, it's like kind of vocab. Arpeggios is a little bit like good I guess it's like knowing your grammar rules really well. It's useful. It's crucial, very, very hugely important. But if you rely on it all the time, you're saying things well, but you don't have a lot to say. And so here is, I think, the big thing. In a lot of ways, I should have begun with this originally, but I like my scales and arpeggios preambles, so we're getting into this now. In my opinion, the best thing to help you with learning to improvise and finding cool ways to get nice ideas to make your playing sound melodic is licks. So for this last part of the lesson, I'm going to show you how to steal people's music and to steal it well. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to stick to the pentatonic scale at first. So this next piece is a track by my friend Tom Sullivan. I'm going to improv over one of his ideas, and when I do, I'm going to use a couple of famous solos that those of you watching probably know. I'm going to just do my thing, and I'm very, very curious to see who will recognize which famous kind of leads I am stealing from other people, because my goal is that no one can figure out any of it. Because if you have no clue, that's a metaphor for arpeggios. Yeah, it's like I said, my linguistics things are probably quite clumsy, but I like them. So yeah, but I do think there is something to be said for it all the same. So what I'm going to do now is, as I said, my goal is that you don't recognize any of these solos, but I'm going to sneak into this. But, well, you'll see. You'll find out. So here we go. This one's thanks to my friend Sully. No, not money. It was another brick in the wall. But I'm gonna give you half a point for that one. Here comes another one. Here one goes again. Yes, 1 point to Andy. Okay, and one more. When I said one more, I lied. Here comes another one. That was really ill-fitting, considering that the music kind of like decrescendoed and I was doing my kind of widdly. Okay, so I think some of you got those. So what I stole there and very sort of ham-fistedly kind of chucked into my kind of jam over Sully's awesome synthwave. So I did, as you got Andy, I did Bohemian Rhapsody. Yeah, as I said, Frank, it was another brick in the wall. I also stuck in Nothing Else Matters. Did it bit of Enter Sandman. And what was the other one I did? I should remember this. Yeah, I did Bow Rap. I did Stairway to Heaven. That was it. And the reason I used kind of those is because, well, this is pretty much how these kind of traditions have been passed down from decade to decade to decade to decade by different musicians, not just in the case of guitar. But this is why, this is why that meme of the lick, this is why it's a thing, because the idea is, yes, you go, Andy. So the reason these work and the reason these kind of make sense musically is because of all the stuff that we've been talking about today about scales and arpeggios and harmony. And another crucial thing, and this is a really big part of why it might have been noticeable but hard to exactly place what I was playing, is rhythm. Because when you're playing, when you're using that piece, for example, was in 4/4. It was quite a fast 4/4. And so when I was doing Nothing Else Matters, now originally that's in 6/8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's slow. It is, and it's actually in B minor. So I brought it down. A whole tone, and instead of feeling it over a 6/8, I'm slightly readapting my rhythm for something in 4/4. Which now that I'm trying to do it about, it's quite hard because I'm so used to that sound. Same with Stairway to Heaven. That's usually in A minor. So. And I'm bringing it into. There's also in that particular song, there's things that Jimmy Page does. Like, he hits that with chord progression. F there. So. Which obviously I'm not doing. I'm just. I'm sticking to the usual thing. So that's one little kind of tweak I'm doing. And this is kind of how you can take ideas that work from other places and repackage them. Because what you are not doing, what you are absolutely not doing, is stealing anything. This idea, this blues box of which pretty much existed in almost every single solo I just did. It's been handed down in musical tradition for decades. It will continue to be handed down in different ways, from B.B. King just going, from Hendrix going, from Tony Iommi going, from Zakk Wylde going, and it's going to keep going. It's not going to just be completely supplanted by something else. It's going to be readapted, just like language gets readapted, and just how the way we use slang, the way that we kind of apply tone, completely changes a solo. So one that I was using, I'm going. So this is a really, really short kind of lick by Kiko Loureiro, which I have been using. I've been learning for one of his tracks. I've been learning, and it goes really, really simple little trick. So he does this. Really simple, short idea in a minor scale. Now, there's a bunch of little things I can do just with that. So if I were to, so the way he does it is something like that. It just like that, kicks, then bends that note. But if I were to change that, then all of a sudden it's kind of a bit more like Satriani-esque, something like that. Or it'd be a bit more Gary Moore with it. Or even be a bit more notey with it if I want. But it's still, the core skeleton of it is exactly just that idea. Another one that I was using, and the way that we do this, because what you still need to do is you need to understand a certain amount of the theory on the fretboard, which puts you in that position, which makes the scale or the lick readaptable. So, for example, as I was doing, I'm going, oh, okay, well, this is in minor pentatonic scale, so I can just repurpose that. But to do that, you have to have a certain understanding, at least, or like either through actual theory or just through like oral understanding of where the tonic is, or whatever interval that you're beginning on is. So I know that's the fifth, because that's the sound of getting a root note on the fifth. And that's going to be something I'm going to be going into in kind of incoming weeks, about how we can get more used to that sort of thing, and being able to do that just off the fly without having to figure it out through like a scale or through a tab or anything. Now, another one that I've been using a lot is, I'm going to be mentioning Greg Howe again, because I was learning one of his tracks. I think it's called Tempest Flow. Is that Tempest something? Yes, Tempest Flow. So Tempest Pulse. Ugh, yeah. Okay. So what a noob I am. So there's two ideas which I really, really liked in it. One of them is really simple, one of them is less simple. So, where was it? Yeah, there you go. Really, really simple. And that, so I'm using, if I'm thinking of this as then this note is your root note. And I'm like, okay, that sounds cool. So that, the Sully's track, which I was improvising over, is in D. So I can take that and I can go, okay, I can take that and I can repurpose that idea, but I need to do it in D. So this is B, this is D. This guitar is fun little advertisement for the Kemper here. This whole time that I've been doing this lesson, my guitar has been tuned to D standard. You're hearing it standard tuned, and with the Kemper, at the click of a button, I can do this. So yeah, anyway, that's quite aside, notwithstanding. So as I said, so this idea was this. In B, and I want to do it in D. So I'm going to check out how I do this, and a couple of variations on it. I want to try to keep it as close as possible while interpreting it with slightly different phrasing each time, slightly different rhythms each time, and how doing that can make a new sounding part, a new sounding bit, which doesn't necessarily sound like I just lifted that from somewhere else. When volume was off, that would do it. Okay, so the idea is that I'm trying to get as much from this one idea, from this one very, very short sequence of notes as I possibly can, milking that for all it's worth. Because there's a lot you can get out of a really, really simple idea. That's why, like, when people go, oh, well, why do people rate these like classic kind of like guitar players like Brian May, Jeff Beck so much? It's because they do know how to get so much out of a short amount of notes. That's not to say that you shouldn't wail like crazy if you want to. You totally should. I do. But you can still use as much as you can these simple ideas. And you can get that from more complicated ones as well. So another idea in this tune, and the same Greg Howe tune, was that I really, really liked, and I'm going to try to do. But here's the cool thing: if you make mistakes with this stuff, if you're doing something which isn't exactly like I'm doing, that's cool, because as long as it's in the key, as long as it works with whatever you are playing, then it's still it's become something more of its own. Those mistakes can make for something cool and something that's uniquely yours. So, another one I like is this. So. I like that because it does kind of go slightly outside the key, but it kind of works. So there's certain things. That tune I was doing for Blinding Lights is kind of coming to mind again. That's a little bit better. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try to stick that in somewhere. So as I said, that was in B. So I'm going to go back to your. Why not? Yeah, you can always do a little bit more your in your life. So I'm going to be in E. Let's see if I can find it. So. So the notes which kind of went out of the scale didn't work so well over this context, but me having taken this idea, now that's just, with the exception of that little tail, that's still just using the same major and minor scales which I began this lesson with. However, he's feeling it a little bit differently than I would because he's not me, so it's gonna sound a little bit different. And he's a lot better than me as well. He's a lot better than pretty much everyone in this chat, and everyone probably half the people on social media as a whole. But it's coming from a different brain. It's a different kind of melodic kind of idea thought of by someone else, and you're going to get something that sounds a little bit different. So. Andy's comment, I feel like flying through a cave using a dead pterodactyl as a glider wouldn't make sense if you haven't seen your Hunter from the Future, and that's, I think what I just said sums up exactly why you should watch your Hunter from the Future. Anyway, a couple of very, very last things. So yeah, so by doing that, I just think, okay, so when I start that, I'm starting on the 5th again. And then I don't actually need to know what's going on. I mean, it's a major scale kind of idea, but I don't necessarily need to know that. As long as I know that where it begins and where it how it sounds over a certain chord, then I can use it and I can try to adapt it as best to what works for me. So my last metaphor, I'm running slightly over time, but I want to give you one more metaphor for language versus music. So I would say using your licks, figuring out ideas that way, is closer to learning phrases or sentences. So in language, learning how to say, rather than learning the word for where, and then is, and then the, and then things goes, learning how the proper way it would be to say something, and then using your own knowledge of vocab, scales, and grammar, arpeggios, and harmony to build up your own voice and your sound as an improviser. And when you have a good understanding of all three of these things, that's when you can go from either just playing kind of safe chord tones with arpeggios, just adapting someone else's ideas with licks, just using notes or words with scales, and it's becoming part of the bigger picture, and you start to do a lot more with your improvisation. So that's that's been a bit of a kind of a stream of consciousness chat about improvisation. Now, that's everything I just said today is stuff that works for me. And the cool thing about this, because it is in a lot of ways an abstract kind of discipline where there are certain right answers, but the line between right and wrong is very, very frayed. A lot of people would agree with me a lot. A lot of people would really disagree with me, and we're both kind of right. It's kind of like whatever works for you. But the most important thing, in my opinion, to do this is have a good ear. If you have a good enough ear, then all the stuff with your scales and your arpeggios will fall into place as a result, or you will be able to use that knowledge of instruments and harmony to help you find that. So that is something that I'm going to be going into in coming weeks. I'm going to be talking to you all about intervals, how to figure them out, how to spot chord progressions. But next week I'm going to be dissecting another solo. Last time it was one by Alex Skolnick from some Old School Testament. Next week I'm going to do one of my ones. We're going to do the solo to For Macarius, Lake of the Dead. So that's going to be fun. It's going to be a very, very metal kind of time, as opposed to some slightly more abstract one from today. So I hope that you guys all managed to learn something. If anyone has any questions, please do just throw comments at me after I'm done, or send me a message or whatever have you. I am going to attach the campaign one more time. If anyone can donate even just a tiny bit for War Child, that would be really, really awesome. It's a tough time for everybody, but every little helps. Was that Tesco's or Sainsbury's? I haven't been to many shops since. Tesco's. Okay, yeah. I don't go to as many shops as I used to in the before times when we used to go outside. So my memory's not sketchy. Anyway, I hope that you all have a good evening. Stay safe. Keep practicing. And now I need to figure out how to close this on this. Also, this was definitely not sponsored by Bex Blue, but if you guys are listening, I'm still